What's up, Game Boys and Girls? Big T here, back with another video. And this video, I'm going to further explore the Sega Dreamcast, and because I did a live stream talking about it the day before his birthday. 25 years of Sega Dreamcast. Crazy that that system came out 25 years ago. But you know, we getting old. Some of us, we're all getting older, but some of us are older already. But I just wanted to kind of go over like my experience with the Sega Dreamcast and what I thought about it, the launch of it and whatnot. So yeah, so obviously the Sega Dreamcast launched in 9/9/1999. That is September 9th, 1999, and it was a glorious day. I told the story about how I was a little PO'd about Sega Dreamcast, or Sega in general, and I wasn't paying much attention to the Dreamcast and its launch and the hype surrounding it, because I was done. I was upset how they kind of just dropped the Saturn. I was a huge Saturn fan. They fumbled the ball with the North American releases. We didn't get a lot of the stuff that Sega of Japan got because of Bernie Stoller. Rest in peace to Bernie Stoller. His plan was to not really care that much about Japanese games and like RPGs and whatnot. He thought the American market didn't care about that stuff. He was wrong, but it is what it is. So we missed out on the States on a lot of great games. Now I subsequently bought those games because I used to go to Blockbuster Games, which is, you know, Blockbuster Video. They have a video game. They used to have video game only stores where they sold games, and I used to go there. And they had a section where they had basically import games, and it was pretty easy to import and play import games on your Saturn. All you needed was like the action replay carts, which were everywhere. You know, you can still get one easily today. And they just allowed you to. Some of them gave you memory. Some of them gave you like memory for saving games, but also extra memory, extra RAM for playing certain games, Japanese games that you would need for, like, you know, a lot of the fighting games, like the Street Fighter, X-Men versus Street Fighter and stuff like that, needed more RAM to run those games, and so that would be inside the action replay card as well, and you could, you know, play games that way. But this is about the Dreamcast, but I just wanted to set that up because I was really upset about how it ended for Saturn. I was kind of done with Sega at that point, but I had a friend of mine who I used to work with named Anthony. He was in my ear the entire time, basically for a year, telling me about Sega Dreamcast. You got to get this. It's a beautiful console. It looks great. The games look amazing, blah, blah, blah. I wasn't hearing it, but the closer it got to that date, I was listening, and I eventually put down on, you know, what do you call it? Not down payment. What is it called? Pre-order. I put a pre-order out there for it. I put some money on it every once in a while, so it'd be paid off by the time I got there. So I subsequently I pre-ordered like 5 games. So, you know, the Sega Dreamcast was $200. You know, with 5 games, that's what, 10, 20. What am I saying? 10. So it's like that was another $200, $250 after taxes and whatnot for 5 games, and I think I have them remembered properly here. So we're gonna go over that. But let's look at the hardware real quick. Obviously, this is the Sega Dreamcast. This is my day one Dreamcast right here, and it is still going fine. Surprisingly, because a lot of times these things will stop reading discs. But I also bought one that didn't read discs because I'm going to mod it. So this is the one I bought. I thought if you watched the live stream, it's the one with the sticker. No, this is the one I actually bought with the sticker on it. No, what am I trying to say? This is my day one here, and this one is actually the one I bought, and I swapped out. If you can see there. You can see how it's yellowing. That is my original modem. I swapped it out with the not yellowing modem from the one that I bought that the disk drive doesn't work. So I'm gonna mod that. I think it's this one. Yeah, this one. I'm gonna mod this one, and I'm going to put it in this snazzy case I have here. That way Be a nice cool case, and maybe I'll put some LEDs in there to get some light going in there, some cool LED lights. But yeah, here's the hardware. Like I said, there's the open button. You can see the disk drive is there. Power button, power it on. 4 controller ports, which was a very smart move because that's what Nintendo did with the N64. And that way, out of the box, you got 4-player multiplayer, which is great. On the back here, you have your power, you have the AV out, and you have the serial port, and you have the modem right here, which has the basically the phone cable goes in there. This is 30. What is it called? 28. What is it? 28 megabytes per second or something like that. It was, it's the modem from that time, with the phone modem, basically, with the dial-up. And yeah, so it also has an expansion port, or no, this one doesn't actually have it. I was thinking of the Saturn. But yeah, great console, beautiful design. I love the compact nature of it. It feels like a kind of a bigger CD player that you would have back in the day, but it maintains like that console look, which I love. I don't like consoles that, when we got to the 2000s, they were trying to be more like, to look good in entertainment centers or entertainment systems, to look like, they didn't stand out too much. But I like my console to stand out and look like a console, you know what I'm saying? So this is my least favorite thing about the Dreamcast, and that is the controller. I don't like the ergonomics of this controller. It just doesn't feel good to hold. You want your hands to be out like this, because that's the natural feel. You don't want your arms pushing into your chest, basically, to hold this, to grip it properly. You want your arms out like this, and I'll show you a better option later. But here you go. Obviously, it has an open slot there because that's where the memory card goes. That has a screen on it, and that is the VMU, which is the dusty. No, the VMU stands for the visual memory unit, because you can see things that happen here. So if your game comes up, you're playing your game, you turn the power on your system, the game logo will pop up on there, and you can see different prompts and whatnot on here. Certain games you could download information to your VMU, and you can see there's a controller set up. It has a D-pad and action buttons, so you can do certain things, like raising those little animals that were in Sonic Adventure and whatnot. You can do that, away from your game, which is pretty cool. Come back and go to your chow garden and whatnot. So you put this right in here, boom, there you go. There's your VMU, and also, just like the N64, it has a rumble pack. I think it's called the trimmer pack. That was the name for it. And you plug it in here, so it has 2 slots, unlike the N64 controller, so you can put them both in at the same time. And yeah, makes the controller feel a lot better. It's a lot loose. I hated this right here, this design here. I wish that it would have came out here, made it maybe, it wouldn't make the design look as cool in the back, but it makes more sense. And I'll show you again another representation. So you take your cord there, and you put it in that little area there to hold it, so it would actually come up like a normal controller. But it was just weird. It was a weird design, and most people just let it hang like that. But yeah, so Retro Fighters came out with a better controller, which is perfect. This is see how it lets your arms come out like this. That is more comfortable, and all the buttons are nice and easy to reach. The trigger buttons I like a lot better on this. Everything else is pretty similar. The buttons and for pressing and all that, D-pad and all that. Actually, I do like the D-pad on here better. I think the D-pad on the Dreamcast is just it comes up too high. Put it that way. It's just like, look how how much that protrudes out of the controller. And you look at that, and it's just like a lot more comfortable, I think. But as you can see, the cable itself comes up like that, so you don't have to do some weird attachment to have that kind of regular controller feel. And so, yeah, it just feels a whole lot better. And I wish that that was better. Another problem with the Dreamcast controller is that it doesn't have a second analog stick. N64 didn't either, but it doesn't have enough face buttons to compensate for that. So it made like controlling FPS games and whatnot really strange. And a lot of times you would have a lot of action stuff going on with your shoulder buttons. Actually, the original controller doesn't have shoulder buttons. It only has the triggers. So that's 2 less buttons than the Retro Fighter has to bat. And then so a lot of stuff you were doing either using a D-pad, which make it even more it was just hard to hold and do certain things. Like games like MDK, which is a really cool game I'll show later, is kind of hard to control. So, okay, launch. So launch day, I got my console, and I got 5 games, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And these was the 5 games that I bought right away, or I bought with my pre-order, and that is Soul Calibur. Soul Calibur just blew my mind. I remember seeing it on a demo screen, and it was just amazing to see. The animation, the graphics were mind-blowing at the time. It still looked really good today because it is a 60 FPS game, 60 frames per second. And so when, if you let the game play, they'll show like a demonstration of a fighter, and they'll start doing like moves and spinning, like Kalik, who has the bow staff, the guy on the front here. It's really cool to watch him just kind of do this demonstration, and it looks like a live, a motion capture situation, and the animation is amazing and fluid and beautiful. It's just one of the best fighting games of all time, as far as I'm concerned, and still holds up today. Next up, we have the venerable Sonic Adventure. This game blew my mind. Sure, there's jank, and people point that out, especially now. But none of that mattered to me at the time. To have a Sonic game in 3D and it looked beautiful and it's fast as heck, another 60 frames per second game, which is hard to come by consistently today. But Dreamcast was popping those things out like candy. It was pretty easy. Sonic Adventure was very dope. And this bad boy here got a lot of play. NFL 2K. I was playing Quarterback Club mostly on N64 at the time. A lot of guys were on Madden. Some people were on the 989 sports games from Sony. Like I think it's NFL Game Day and stuff like that. NBA Game Time or something like that. But for me, when the 2K sports games came out, specifically NBA or NFL 2K, just blew my mind. This game looked amazing. The graphics again were beautiful, 60 FPS. It was just a beautiful game to see. And the voice acting in it was amazing also. I love the voiceover work. Now here's one of my custom cases because I don't have the original anymore. As you can see, I printed all this stuff out. But this is for Dynamite Cop. Now Dynamite Cop is the successor, basically spiritual successor, to Die Hard, the Die Hard arcade games, Die Hard trilogy and whatnot that were on Saturn and PS1. And this was a continuation of that. I think they just didn't want to pay for the license anymore, and so they just went with Dynamite Cop. And boy, awesome game. I used to play this in the arcade a whole lot, but then they came out on the Dreamcast, which happened a lot with the Dreamcast games. It came out from the arcade to the Dreamcast, which is dope. And this game, it's one of the first games I played when I went home, and I beat it in like 45 minutes. This is a very quick game to beat. It was very arcadey. So yeah, Dynamite Cop. And then the last I got was Ready to Rumble, another game that just looked amazing. Visually, the animations were amazing. The characters, when they moved, when they talked, again at that time was like mind-blowing because you didn't see that consistently at that time, and to see these characters with so much character and personality was dope. And this game series was amazing. All right, so let me get some of this stuff out of the way, and we'll talk about some more hardware in a second. when I show you I guess I would call them launch window games. So these are, I think these are all launch titles, but I didn't get them all at launch. Obviously, I wasn't going to buy everything. But these games were also a huge part of my initial love for the Dreamcast. So next up, which was another big arcade game that came home, Sega Bass Fishing. And obviously this is a very arcade game. It's not something you're going to play for 30 hours. Maybe, I don't know, you could. I'm sure over the years I've played at least that at this point of this game. But it's, you know, it's bass fishing, you know. So, but the cool thing about that, or this game, is that it comes, well, it didn't come with it. You didn't need this, but you could buy it separately. The Sega Bass Fishing controller. So, trying to get it out of all the light. Bring it closer, maybe that'll help. There we go. The Sega Bass Fishing controller, which is, it has all the buttons you need to control a game. But then it has the reel, which is just brings you into the game even more. Fantastic. Only made for the Sega Bass Fishing games, obviously, but it was a cool thing to have. Let's put that there. Next up is Blue Stinger. This is also, like I said, a launch title. This was like, I guess you could say Sega's or Activision's attempt at like something like a Resident Evil, but kind of sci-fi-ish. It wasn't not very good game, but I wanted something that maybe lasted a little longer than all the arcadey stuff I was buying. So I had the fighting game, I had the bass fishing game, I had, you know, boxing with Ready to Rumble and all that kind of stuff, but I wanted like a meatier game. This was it, but not great, not a great game. But you know, I think it's still worth it. It's not that expensive. It's still a what do you call it? It's still kind of worth checking it out. Speaking of arcadey games, Sega Rally 2, which I was a huge big fan of Sega, rally games in general. And the Sega Rally game I had, the first one I had on Sega Saturn, and this is a sequel to that, and this is pretty good. It had some, if I remember correctly, it had some kind of issues, like it stuttered here and there, like it had some kind of like performance issues here and there, which was a little bit disappointing because the game, obviously the arcade version of it ran buttery smooth, and the other Sega games ran pretty smooth, so it was a little disappointing. But the game looks great and mostly runs really good. So I was trying to get a diverse library, and that's the thing about the Sega Saturn, is that it had a huge diverse library out of the gate. I want to say 16 or 17 launch titles, and very good launch titles. Here's another one, Toy Commander. And I'm a sucker for these types of games where you play as a toy or a little action figure from in a larger world, like a Toy Story type of stuff, where you're in a room, like an oversized room, well, at least oversized to you, because you're a toy come to life or something like that. I just like that kind of stuff. It's weird. What's the game? The rabbit game that I just got. I can see it, but I'll put it up on screen. This game has a level like that, and I love it. You're like jumping around in a room basically, or in a house, and you're in the kitchen, and then you're like a kid's room, and there's like a video game console. You're walking across it's basically like a PlayStation, but like a parody PlayStation, and so you're walking across the discs and what. It's really cool. I love that kind of stuff. I love Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, those types of movies where, again, you have people shrunk down and you're in like this giant world, to you anyway. I just like that kind of stuff. And another really cool racer that was amazing, especially in arcades, and it came home to Dreamcast, and this is the best version of it. I think they just released this, or re-released this, not too long ago. A remaster of it. Star Wars Episode 1 Racer. Fantastic, very fast. Obviously 60 frames per second, but the visuals are the best in this version up until I think the remaster that came out, which is basically this but widescreen. I don't think it looks much better than this, not from what I remember, but really, really cool. One of the best games that come out of that terrible movie. And then here's another one of my custom cases. This one's for San Francisco Rush, because I don't know where the original is, because as I said in the live stream, I would keep a lot of my games in like a disc folder, like a binder that had a bunch of disc slots in it, because it was just easy to open it up and go into that once you get a big library. And so I would lose the cases to games doing that kind of stuff, but it is what it is. All right, so next up I want to talk about let's talk about this first. Big multiplayer online game. So the Sega Dreamcast didn't launch right away with SegaNet Online. I think it came out the following year in 2000, and it launched with these amazing games. Or some of these games came after, but games like, as you saw, NFL 2K. NFL 2K1 was the first one that was online, and I didn't game a whole lot online on PC, and to play a competitive game like this for the first time basically online was just like mind-blowing. But people eventually find how to exploit things and cheat. I remember I was playing some guy who you start the game and he's doing all kind of weird substitutions. You could see him substituting all this stuff. Like, what is he doing? And then you go and start the game and he's on offense, and his quarterback was substituted with like the punt return guy. I think it was Allen Rawson on the Falcons back then, and that guy was like really fast. He ran a 4.2, 4.3 or something. And so the guy would hike the ball to Allen Rawson and not the quarterback, and then he'd be gone. Like I couldn't do anything. I remember just like, I'm quitting. I don't want to play this game. I want to play real football when I play online, and I don't like when people exploit and do stuff like that. It's not fun. Maybe it's fun for them, but not for me. Here's another one. This is the NBA 2K basketball, 2K1. They didn't do. I feel like they had. Was there 2K? I don't remember basketball. It had to be, right? Because 2K Sports was freaking amazing on the Dreamcast. This is when it started, and it was Sega. Sega owned Vicarious Visions, and that's who made all these 2K Sports games. And that was the reason EA did not show up on this Sega Dreamcast. I thought it was because they didn't do well on the Saturn, and with Sega pulling the plug on that, they were upset, and so they said they weren't going to support Dreamcast. But this is the reason. It was these amazing sports games. EA did not want to compete with 2K Sports. What a surprise, right? Like all these years I thought it was the other thing, but it was because they didn't. I read recently they didn't like the fact that they would have to compete. Their sports games would have to compete with Sega's amazing Vicarious Vision sports titles, 2K, and it's pretty pathetic because that's where they are today. They don't want to compete, and so that's why they own the NFL license outright and they won't need competition, and it's pretty pathetic. And then obviously 2K2, which came out the following year. Randy Moss was the face of these games, obviously. The baseball game, also amazing. Like all these sports titles from 2K were amazing. They really challenged Madden and the EA stuff. So I could see, the business reasons why EA didn't want to compete, sadly. But also Quake 3 Arena, Quake 3 Arena was just like, wow. This blew my mind back then. It was so fast, even on a 56K modem. It was just amazing to play online with this game. I played hundreds of hours probably in Quake 3 Arena. Just a really dope game. And another game I played hundreds of hours in was this amazing RPG, Phantasy Star Online. This was very cool. Like, I hadn't really done, again, gaming online like that, especially with like a kind of competitive, not competitive, but when you're playing with people. What is it called? I can't think of the word of it. Yeah, I can't remember the name of it, but just playing, you're on the same group, you're playing together. My brain is rotting right now. I don't know. And then I don't know why this was in the group, but it was Ready to Rumble Round 2, which was even better than the first game. They perfected everything with that, and amazing, right? So we move on, and I want to point out another piece of hardware, or another two pieces actually. And here is the Dreamcast keyboard, which was amazing. Obviously good for stuff like Phantasy Star Online, but also good for offline games. A game called Typing of the Dead, which I could not find. I know I have it. Typing of the Dead, which is House of the Dead, but instead of like shooting a gun, you would be typing certain words that were on the bodies of the zombies, and that's how you attack them. And it taught you how to freaking type. Like, that's what was awesome about it. Now, I never learned how to type because I didn't stick to it, but it really would teach you how to type, which was amazing. And I'll talk a little bit more about that aspect from Dreamcast in a minute. And like I said, House of the Dead had the light gun, the original House of the Dead 2, which I feel like it came out on Saturn as well, but obviously the Dreamcast version was great. It was a more close to arcade port of the game. So, and obviously you would use what is this called again? A Starfire. There was other gun controllers or whatnot, but this is the one I have. So very cool. All right, I think that's it for hardware. Yeah. For me anyway. But yeah, so the Dreamcast, an amazing console with tons of amazing games. It only lacked in certain genres. Didn't have too many like big adventure games, and it only had as far as like a bunch of game or a type of from that genre of RPG. It had a few standout games. And I'll get to that in a little bit here too. So I have more games here. Tony Hawk, which I also had on N64, but this version has all the music, so it's much better. And the PlayStation version, obviously, as well. Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2. I have Conquer. I don't know how this got in there. But yeah, there's Conquer. Air Force Delta, which I love. Jet fighter games. I just like space shooter games like Armada. Very good. This is actually a repro. What is it called? Dolphin Blue, right? Yeah, Dolphin Blue. This is a cool thing about Dreamcast is people are still making games for this because the system is really easy to make games for. And so even to this day, new games are being made or ported from other consoles or ported from like indie games that will run. They get ported as well. Here's another one, Sternwind. That's another repro. I haven't opened that one yet because I actually have it on Steam. Trick Style, pretty cool. Kind of this hoverboarding game that's kind of snowboard tricks like. Hydro Thunder. This is actually another one of those launch window games that I ended up getting at some point. Or this was a launch title game that I got in the launch window. And this game, again, a great arcade game, which was fantastic to be able to play this at home. Speed boats, kind of wave race like, but with speed boats, and just fantastic fun game. And then obviously the classic Crazy Taxi. And you guys know what Crazy Taxi is. It's a pretty fun game where you're picking patrons up and dropping them off in a time limit. It's pretty frenetic. It's pretty cool. Great music. Great style. And speaking of style, that was what was cool about the Dreamcast. Is the Dreamcast, Sega didn't just say, all right, here's our lineup of IPs and let's just do new versions of those. They did those with some games, but Dreamcast was like charting a new path. There was so many like inventive, like clever, quirky, fun games that came out for the console. Stuff like Seaman, which was just like off the wall, way different stuff like Space Channel 5, just off the wall, quirky, cool, different stuff. And Sega just continued to do that with the Dreamcast, and which really made for an amazing library. And then you have continuation of Sonic Adventure 2. I think I like this game better, but Sonic Adventure 1 is the one I remember the most because I played it the most. But Sonic Adventure 2 is technically the better game, and it's amazing. Rayman 2, here's another one of my custom cases. Rayman 2, this is probably the definitive version, although I like playing it better with the N64 controller. I just think it works better with that controller. But this game is probably the definitive version because it looks the best. It's the best visually. It looks really nice on the Dreamcast. Here's a hidden gem, Red Dog. I don't think it's that expensive. I highly recommend this game. It's really fun. If you ever played like Blaster Master on the NES back in the day, this is like the 3D version of that. It feels like it. It's really cool. Here's another. All right, let's get into this section here. And this is kind of the standout fighting games on the Dreamcast. We'll start with Mortal Kombat Gold because this was, this is it was on pretty much all the consoles at the time. It wasn't really a standout, but it was a cool fighting game. Dead or Alive 2. This was another kind of system-defining game. It was only on Dreamcast at that time, and the visuals were amazing. The speed, control, and whatnot were great. The jiggle physics for my men of culture out there. This game, fantastic. Obviously, we have Marvel vs. Capcom, the original one, the first one. Very amazing game. It was really good. Marvel vs. Capcom. I was coming from stuff like Street Fighter versus Capcom versus not Capcom versus Street Fighter. What was it called? X-Men versus Street Fighter on Sega Saturn. Those games were great. Darkstalkers 2, stuff like that. And this was kind of the continuation of that, but with Marvel characters in the fray, and really good. But it was outdone by the sequel, Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Like, man, this game is probably somewhere in between. It's in my top 3 as far as most played on the Dreamcast. This game, man, phenomenal. This, especially like we still played in the arcades, and it was a lot of fun to do that. And it was just amazing to have an arcade game like Marvel Capcom 2 at home. Like I don't even remember. I remember Marvel Capcom 1 in the arcade, but it didn't catch on. It wasn't nearly as big as Marvel Capcom 2 was in the arcade. It was way there was way bigger lines and whatnot around that arcade system. Because it was just way more popular than the first one. So, yeah, amazing. And then Virtua Fighter 3 TB. Got some water damage on my on the manual there. It was okay. Like visually, I wasn't up to par, especially when you look at the other games like Soul Calibur and Dead or Alive 2. The leap from Virtua Fighter 2 to 3 visually wasn't as good as I was hoping for. But the gameplay was still Virtua Fighter gameplay, and you love it. 3TB. TB stood for Team Battle, and that's a mechanic that's in the game. So, all right, moving right along here. Another racer, Sega GT, and Sega racing games were freaking awesome. Just Sega sports games in general were great. GT was no exception. Here's my kind of nerdy game, Roller Coaster. Not Tycoon, Coaster Works, which was it's what you think it is. You build roller coasters and you get to ride them, and it was a lot of fun. And I'm sure that was a PC game as well. Wet Tricks is a pretty cool puzzle game. I also have this on N64, but this is a definitive version because it looks really good. The water physics and all that look really cool. I just like games that have cool water in it. That was a weird thing that a lot of people seem to like back in the day. Then you have Fighting Force 2. So this is my kind of adventure game stack, and you'll see. I'm gonna go with this now. there wasn't a lot to deal, a lot of, I guess, a lot of games in this genre. Not at least not that I can really remember. So Fighting Force 2, which was the sequel to Fighting Force, which was a brawler. It was supposed to be basically the 3D version of Streets of Rage, but I guess something happened with the licensing. I don't know, and it just became like they just made new generic names for the characters and whatnot. And if you play Streets of Rage and you look at Fighting Force, you can see who was supposed to be who. It's pretty obvious, but they just, again, kind of like Dynamite Cop, they just didn't use the license and they moved on and they did a whole new kind of thing. But Fighting Force 2 is a completely different game. It's like an action adventure game, over the shoulder kind of third person game, with some kind of platformy elements and whatnot, but not very good, not well received, I remember. But then you have stuff like Spider-Man, which was a port. I believe they ported it. I think it went to PlayStation first, but it's the same game, just better visuals and whatnot, better performance. It's a really good game. It's like if you know what the Dreamcast is, this would have been like the Dreamcast version, except the fact that it was native on the console. So yeah, then you have another one of my custom cases, Sword of the Berserk. I actually just bought the case to make this complete again. So I got a pretty good deal on that. But yeah, Sword of the Berserk. This is probably one of my favorite action adventure games, third-person action games on the Dreamcast. It's really cool. I think it's based on a manga, if I'm not mistaken. That I think they're still going today, making these games. I think there's one on PlayStation 4, but it didn't come out locally, if I remember correctly. And then we have Resident Evil, or Biohazard, as it says here, because this is the Japanese case, but I do have the actual North American game, as you can see there, and everything just fell out of it. But yeah, again, I lost the case, and I saw a really cheap Japanese case, and I said, oh, what the heck, it makes my collection look a little bit more unique, so I went ahead and bought that. And then I have Frogger 2, which, I like my platformers. This is kind of like the evolution of Frogger. If you're old, Frogger back in the day was just like the game where you cross the street, and there's so many clones of it now on iOS and Android, like Hoppy Street or something they call them. But that was the original, so they expanded on this and made it like a full-on platforming game. And then here's my last stack we're gonna get through here for the Sega Dreamcast. And this is kind of like I said, the upper echelon of games. Some of my favorite games in here. Not the greatest games, but just some of my favorite games here. So you have RPGs like Evolution and Evolution 2. These were Ubisoft published games. Who's the developer? Does it say ESP something on the back here? It's hard to see this. ESP Sting. Never heard of them, but these were pretty good RPGs. Now, ones that I don't have, like Grandia 2, because I have it on other consoles. I have Grandia 2 on PlayStation. That was a game that came out on, and I have. I never bought. What is it called? Skies of Arcadia for Dreamcast. I ended up actually getting it for the GameCube. So I missed out on that on Dreamcast. So Dreamcast did have some cool RPGs, just not, a lot. And here's another cool third-person action-adventure game, Slave Zero. I think this would be considered a hidden gem. It's 4 players, and it's like an arena of the city, and you play like this giant mech. And I forget the premise, but that kind of is the premise, but I forget what the story is in this. But I had a lot of fun. Like, the graphics are nice on that one. Here's another one, Draconis. I actually just got the full case for this. This is, I do have the manual. That is the real manual, but I don't have the original case. So I printed it out and put it in this thing. But I just got that as well, pretty cheap. So I'll be making that complete. Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver. This is the definitive version of that game. It's also on PlayStation. It's pretty good on PlayStation, but this is the way you want to play this game, because the visuals are really nice. Or you can buy, today you can get it on PC, and it's basically this game again in widescreen. I think it's widescreen. I don't know. It might not even be widescreen. And obviously my representation for the Tomb Raider series, we had Tomb Raider: The Last Revelation, which was supposed to be the last game, but it wasn't. Tomb Raider was just making too much money, so they continue on obviously to this day. But Last Revelation was this is when Tomb Raider kind of started to feel a little long in the tooth. And by the time they got to Tomb Raider Chronicles, which was the fourth one, which was again, they weren't planning on it, but they did actually make it, and it was kind of like really disjointed, that one. But this was the last kind of traditional Tomb Raider game from that era, and it was pretty good. And then you have a game here that kind of gets mixed reviews. I just love the ambition of this game. It is Omicron, the Nomad Soul. Nomad Soul. This cool thing about this is this game was Quantic Dream's first game. If you know Quantic Dream, they're the guys who went on to do Indigo Prophecy, Heavy Rain, Detroit Become Human. That's that group of guys. And yeah, there's another one I'm not remembering, starring Ellen Page, now Elliot Page. I can't think of the name of that one, but yeah, they make those kind of almost point and click adventure type of games, choose your path kind of stuff. But this was their first game. This was not that at all. This is a third person adventure game, and it's kind of open worldish, and there's a weird story going on. And I remember the big thing was like David Bowie. That's David Bowie right there on the cover. He's a character in the game, and he actually throws a concert in the game. This kind of stuff was just amazing to me at this time. This is like 2000, I think this came out. No, I'm not going to find the date on the back here. I'm looking for the year, but I don't see it. But I'm pretty sure it was like 2000 when this came out, and it was just like super ambitious. It's also on PC. You can still actually buy this game on Steam for pretty cheap. If you want to play it that way, but I recommend it because, you know, if you're thinking again at the time when this came out, this was like a super ambitious game, and it was really cool. And it was ambitious because it also melded genres together, because there's like some first-person shooting stuff going on, obviously third-person adventure. It's heavy on story, open worldish. Like there was a lot of melding of genres in this game, and it didn't quite get there, but I love it for the ambition and the weird story. So yeah, and the final game I'm going to show, I'm sure you're not surprised, is the amazing Shenmue. Now, if this game would have came out in 1999, so the Dreamcast launched in September, if this was a November game, I think we'd still be playing Sega consoles today. It just came out too late. It came out at the end when the Dreamcast was pretty much dying. But this game is super ambitious. It is the third-person big adventure open world-ish game. Obviously, you can only do so much with the hardware back then, so there were loading screens, you know, going from different sections. But this was an epic adventure where you're trying to find out who killed your father. I mean, you saw the guy kill him in front of you, basically. But then you go on this adventure to try to find him and catch up to the killer. I believe it's Lan Di. And you play the character Ryo, this was supposed to be, the concept of this game was actually supposed to be Virtua Fighter RPG. It started off as Virtua Fighter RPG. So this character was Ryo from Virtua Fighter at first, but then it got fleshed out from Yu Suzuki, and he made this cool adventure game. So, but there are still RPG elements in this game. As far as the fighting goes, you learn new technique, new abilities that way. You level up kind of that way. But this is like a big adventure game. There's so many things to do in this game. You can play like classic arcade games from Sega, like Afterburner and whatnot. You can play in the game, so you can play the game in the game. This is one of the first games I remember that did that, because Animal Crossing hadn't come out yet. This is a year or so before Animal Crossing, but this was like before Grand Theft Auto went to 3D. So this was the game that felt like that. But like I said, the Dreamcast was dying, and just never caught on. It couldn't save the Dreamcast. If it would have came out in November of '99, I think it would have been a whole different story. But yeah, I almost forgot these games here. These are what I would call definitive games that define the Dreamcast. I'm going to go through them really quickly. I mean, Jet Grind Radio, freaking amazing. This game is so quirky, stylistic. You're grinding on rails, you're skating, inline skating. The music is amazing in this. You're doing the graffiti work. Awesome game. If you have a Dreamcast, you got to have that. Same thing with Virtua Tennis. There's a few of them that came out later. I know the Williams sisters became like the the cover people for these games. And they're all really good. Like, if you love tennis games, and I do, great series. Like I said earlier, MDK2, this game was really weird to control on the Dreamcast controller. There is a PS2 version that's a lot easier to play. The Dreamcast version is a little awkward to play because the face buttons were basically arrows buttons, so you go up, down, left, and right using the face buttons, so it was a little confusing. And then obviously Echo the Dolphin, which was a big game on the Sega Genesis, and this was the first game to come out after that. We had a console that didn't have it. The Saturn didn't have a Echo game, but man, this game, especially at the time, was beautiful. The water physics, the graphics, the dolphin, everything was just amazing on this game. And then you have Sega Smash Pack Volume 1, which is funny because this is Volume 1. There was no Volume 2. We didn't get to another version because, again, the Dreamcast died. But you have a lot of cool classic Sega games on here. Genesis games like Sonic the Hedgehog, Golden Axe, Shining Force, Streets of Rage 2, Columns, Wrestle War, Virtua Cop 2, which is actually a Saturn game, Vengeance Shinobi, Sega Swirl, Altered Beast, Vector Man, and Phantasy Star 2. So really cool to have. This is one of the first games that did that gave you a multi-pack. I mean, that was the time where that kind of started to happen already. You got like arcade classics compilations, and this is one of the first games that did that, so that was really cool. So yeah, Sega Dreamcast, amazing system. Died way too young, died too soon. Sega finally got it right, and they didn't get rewarded for it, unfortunately. Things that hurt it, obviously the PlayStation coming out. PlayStation 2 came out a year into this Dreamcast life cycle, and a lot of people were just kind of waiting for that. There was so much hype around the PS2, and Sega just couldn't sustain that. But another thing that hurt, if you look here on the front there, it says, well, it doesn't say a lot right now, so there you go. Compatible with Windows, can you see that? Windows CE. And so Windows CE was basically the operating system for this, which made this console very vulnerable to getting hacked and pirated. And that's what happened a lot on this system. A lot of pirating went on for this system, unfortunately. And so a lot of the games weren't selling because people were ripping them and sharing them and ripping them and sharing. You can just easily put, a ripped game into this and play it right off the bat. And that was a sad thing. That also hurt. I didn't partake because I didn't want to do that kind of thing. I like my physical games, as you can see. I probably showed you guys 70 games, 60 games probably just now, because I love the Dreamcast. And unfortunately, the pirating scene did not help, and it was already like a small install base, and it couldn't grow because people were sharing stuff. They were sharing the not the consoles, but they were sharing the games. So that's where you make your money at as a company, game company, is from the game sales and royalties from third parties and whatnot. And if your games aren't selling because people are pirating them, you don't make any money. And so they lost a lot of money, and they just couldn't sustain itself. And it's sad because, again, Dreamcast was an amazing console. It would have been great to see it go through its entire life cycle, competing with the GameCube. Maybe the Xbox would have thought better to not, maybe it wouldn't have came out. Maybe it would have just waited to the 360, or not at all. Who knows? It could have changed everything. So, yeah, sad, but it is what it is. It happens. It's business. That's what happens. It's a free market. So, but yeah, that is my Dreamcast video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have some memories you want to share of the Dreamcast, go ahead. Like I said, it was probably top 3 of my favorite consoles of all time. Top 4, somewhere in there. Fantastic console. Just for unfortunate events. Luckily, a lot of stuff that had nothing to do with the console itself, that had to do with the business decisions that Sega made before it. Like, obviously, the Sega CD, which was, wasn't a colossal failure or anything like that. It just didn't really permeate the way Sega wanted. And then they had the 32X, which was a colossal failure. Then you had the Sega Saturn, which was a colossal failure. So there was, people in the market, people, in gaming, lost a little bit of, Sega lost a little bit with the consumer base. They lost a lot of trust with the consumer base, and didn't help the Sega Dreamcast when it came out. And yeah, so, and the behemoth that was the Sony PlayStation 2 also kind of helped to kill the poor Dreamcast. But yeah, we're going to talk about the good things we love. Like I did already, we love what the Dreamcast brought to the table and what it did for gaming. And so we salute it 25 years after its launch. Yeah, so if you have any memories, let me know in the comments below. Share some of your favorite games, some stuff like that. Let me know. Hit me in the comment section. And yeah, that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you for watching and listening, and see you fools next time. And remember to keep dreaming.